podcast where mental health meets real life. I'm your host, Samantha Ariza, therapist, educator, and a semi-normal human being on the regular. But overall, your go-to for real, relatable conversations about healing, growth, and emotional wellness. Around here, we believe that mental health doesn't have to be stiff or scary. We keep it human, practical, and have a little bit of fun along the way because you know what? Life's messy and we're all just trying to figure it out. Each week, you'll get honest insights, science backed tools, and stories that remind you that you're not alone in this. Whether you're on your own healing journey or supporting someone else, there's something here for you. So take a breath, grab a cup of coffee, just get comfy, and let's dive in. So today's hot take is bold and mostly uncomfortable, but it's not without merit. The whole idea of the mental health industry profits from keeping people sick is a doozy, right? It's a heavy one. But here's the thing, it's a critique I think we need to talk about. Not to bash every provider or discredit real care, but to look at the structures, incentives, and even systems that sometimes prioritize profit over people. So, what are we going to talk about this episode? Let's break it down. We're going to break it down into what this hot take really means, how over medicalization and insurance really distort care that people need. What do the peer reviewed studies say about systemic incentives? And how we can think about mental health care in a way that's more ethical, more effective, and more human. We will also touch on wellness capitalism and what that even means. So, if you're ready, let's go. So, let's be clear. This isn't about your therapist, your psychiatrist, or the local social worker trying to help clients under enormous pressure. It's not about them at all. This hot take is about the systems in place, how the mental health industry, when influenced by profit driven models, can shift from helping people heal to managing symptoms indefinitely, and how that shift, intentional or not, can trap people in cycles of care that aren't always designed for recovery. And let's start with the basic, most foundational critique of them all. Over-medicalization. Over-medicalization happens when everyday distress, grief, or emotional discomfort gets pathologized, labeled as a disorder, and treated like an illness, often without attending to context, culture, or even root causes. A major review titled Medicalizing Distress, Ignoring Public Health in 2014 argues that psychiatry has lowered diagnostic thresholds over time, turning more and more normal emotional responses into disorders that warrant treatment. This article points to the expansion of disruptive mood dysregulation disorder in children, which was designed to reduce bipolar diagnosis, but now just makes a diagnosis out of tantrums and frustration. What is the takeaway? That expanding definitions equals expanding markets. Another paper, Medicalization and Overdiagnosis, What Society Does to Medicine, that came out in 2016, explains that diagnostic creep isn't just a psychiatric issue. It's what happens when health industries and social norms collide, turning sadness into disorder, shyness into social anxiety, and trauma into a permanent identity. And in global mental health, a scathing critique titled The Medicalization of Global Mental Health by Summerfield warns that Western mental health models often push medication and diagnostic frameworks onto populations without addressing the root, like poverty, violence, and inequality. So while diagnosis can open doors to things like care, accommodations, and understanding, it can also define people by pathology and create dependency on ongoing treatment without addressing the root issues. But what are we really here to talk about? Insurance, right? Here's where the rubber hits the road. Insurance reimbursement drives treatment choices. In the US, many providers have to diagnose to bill. Yeah, you heard that right. And if you didn't hear about this before, you've heard it now. If you want your client to get covered for therapy, you have to assign them a clinical disorder. I do it all the time because I have to. The article Commercial Health Insurance Creates Obstacles to Mental Health Care in 2023 points out that insurers require pre-authorization, they may have session limits, there's strict documentation of medical necessity. So instead of seeing therapy as a preventative, supportive, or developmental process, it gets framed as a treatment for a disorder, often chronic and recurrent. And that's no accident. A RAND study from 2023 found that spending on mental health services rose 53% between 2020 and 2022. But the number of visits only increased by 39%. That means that the cost per visit went up even when services didn't expand. And guess where the profit lives? In long-term care clients, in repeat prescriptions, and structured billable sessions. But don't get this twisted. This doesn't mean your therapist is trying to keep you sick, but it does mean that the system doesn't financially reward recovery the way it rewards management. And even on the clinician side, it's such a struggle because all the clinician wants to do, like me, all I want to do is to help people, and I have to jump through these hoops to help people. Originally, when I started my private practice, I started as cash because I didn't have insurance companies behind me. And the process to get credentialed with insurance companies is a whole process. At the end of my credentialing process, I had tried a credential with two and only had done one successfully. And it took 7 months before I was able to take insurance from them. The other one, there was some miscommunication, and I didn't even get credentialed with them. Which is why there are a lot of different companies now, like Headway and Alma, that take care of that credentialing process to kind of, free flow it for therapists. But at the end of the day, they're still a business too. So just to get in with insurance companies is a struggle. And then the whole documentation to make sure that your client still gets their therapy sessions and you get paid for your work is another kind of struggle. It's hard, and I know there's so much debate on social media about the fact of clinicians' pay rates and what they get paid, and is this worth it? Are they just trying to rob you? What does that mean for clients who can't access because they can't pay? This whole system is just messed up, and it just harms everyone in the process. So let's take a break to talk about something completely different. What happens when you're in the middle of an emotional spiral and you don't have the time to wait on your insurance to clear? That's why I created Emotional First Aid for Crisis Moments, because sometimes we need something right now and we can't wait for the next available appointment. It's a toolkit for what to do when everything feels like too much. This course is a practical, trauma-informed video lesson that walks you through how to ground yourself, regulate your nervous system, and to make a plan. Right when you're struggling in the middle of an emotional overwhelm. Whether you're anxious, shut down, or just numb, I'll teach you simple techniques like box breathing, vagus nerve activation, and the crisis card that you can carry with you anywhere. It's fast, it's accessible, and comes with your own printable workbook, so you're never stuck wondering what to do next. You can find this course now at arizainspire.com and be ready for the next time a mental health moment really hits you hard. Because real support starts with real tools. Now let's get back to the episode. Now let's talk about the other part of mental health, medication. Because medication absolutely has a place in mental health treatment. For many people, it's life saving. But it's also a multi-billion-dollar industry, and that can raise some questions. A 2022 analysis from Archives of Public Health looked at Belgian prescription patterns and found a significant increase in psychoanaleptics, medications like SSRIs and stimulants, without a parallel improvement in mental health outcomes. But that's not unique to just Belgium. The editorial, The Paradox of Mental Health, Overtreatment and Underrecognition, notes that in many countries, mild cases are treated aggressively, while severe mental illness remains underfunded and neglected. Why? Because it's easier to market to the worried well than it is to invest in long term community based support for people with complex needs and those who are really struggling and in need. But here's where it kind of gets a little dark. When diagnoses are treated as lifelong, when medications are indefinite, and when therapy becomes routine symptom management instead of transformation, we start to see a care system that benefits more from chronic clients than from recovered ones. And yes, recovery isn't always linear. Some people need that ongoing support, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the issue is when that support becomes standard rather than intentional. The system profits more when you keep coming back, when you keep refilling your prescription, and when you don't get better. But you also don't leave either. And that's the heart of this hot take. This is where the struggle comes, is this idea of continuing to try to get better, but not really getting better. And then where do you look? But if we pivot from that traditional medical system to that booming world of wellness apps, supplements, therapy memes, journaling challenges, sound baths, nervous systems, coaches, and trauma informed like everything, if the medical system profits by treating sickness, then wellness capitalism profits by selling healing, often to people who already feel failed by that traditional care. And I know what you're probably saying and thinking. Hey, Samantha, didn't you just do an ad read for your own product? Because I would be lying if I didn't acknowledge the fact that I too am a part of this whole wellness movement. But to not mention it would be missing a crucial part of this hot take and myth that needs to be addressed, while also kind of explaining why Ariza Inspire Co. even has to exist. Because the honest truth is that wellness capitalism didn't just come out of nowhere. It exploded because people are frustrated with overbooked therapists and inaccessible psychiatrists. They are over it with insurance gatekeeping, making therapy harder to get to and harder to sustain. Many feel this diagnosis over symptomology or being judged by that clinical system. And healing is deeply personal. People crave that agency, that ability to move for themselves, not just being diagnosed. So the market filled the gap. It offered tools you can use without a diagnosis, language that feels empowering, coaches instead of clinicians, products and practices that promise control and clarity. And when done well, that can actually help. So, what are the real benefits of this wellness space? Because we have to give credit when it's due. Number one is accessibility. You don't need a referral, you don't need insurance, or even have to fill out any intake forms to take a meditation app or breathwork session or do a journaling prompt. And it has language that resonates instead of stuff like generalized anxiety disorder. You hear nervous system dysregulation. It feels a lot more human and a lot less clinical. And sometimes that softer framing helps people engage with care who would otherwise, just shut down. There are more holistic offerings as well. Many wellness tools acknowledge the role of trauma, environment, relationships, and areas that traditional psychiatry often overlook. But they also offer community and peer support. Online communities, therapy informed Instagram accounts, ADHD TikTok give people something in the medical system or something that this medical system often fails to deliver, that connection and relatability. In a world where traditional care is expensive, rigid, or invalidating, wellness brands offer an approachable alternatives. But this is where it gets messy because wellness capitalism also operates on a business model. And just like the mental health industry, it profits when you feel incomplete. It sells healing as a product. You don't just journal, you need a $50 guided workbook. You're not just meditating, you're subscribing to a $200 a year app. There's always a next course, a next trauma training, a next nervous system tool. It's almost like, when does it end? But it can also shift blame to individuals. If you're not regulated or aligned or manifesting, it must be your fault. You didn't journal hard enough. You skipped your affirmations for the day. This just mirrors that worst part of hustle culture. You're just not doing enough. It also lacks that regulation. Anyone can claim to be trauma informed. There are breathwork facilitators leading sessions with zero safety trainings. Influencers sell supplements with no scientific backing. And when people get harmed, there's no way around it. There's no help from it. There's no justice, which is why I created Ariza Inspire Co. I can only fit so many people on my schedule. And there are so many people in need. I'm not saying my course or tools are the only ones out there that can help, but I know mine are grounded in the work that I do every day. I created this as another way to help, and I know there are other therapists out there who are trying to do the same with their courses and tools. So it doesn't just have to be me. But there's that thought that these tools and these wellness apps and all of this is centered around privilege because a lot of wellness content assumes you have the time, the quiet space, and even the disposable income. So, what happens to that single mom working two jobs or that teen in a chaotic home? Healing shouldn't be a luxury. But let me not be the only one who says this. Let's go into peer reviewed research on this wellness industry. A 2023 article in Frontiers in Psychology explored the commodification of healing and found that many wellness brands use trauma and empowerment language to drive sales, often without offering any evidence based tools or clear outcomes. A BMJ Global Health commentary in 2022 noted that wellness culture has moved from empowerment to pressure, where people feel like they're failing at healing because they haven't bought or tried everything, which is an awful feeling. And researchers have coined the term healthism to describe the pressure to optimize every corner of a life, which ironically increases stress for people already burnt out because we can't give 100% to every area of our life. Something has to give. So, what's the difference between empowerment and exploitation? Empowerment says, here are tools, use what works for you. Exploitation says, you're not whole without our product. Empowerment invites curiosity. Exploitation breeds insecurity. The line is very thin, and it's kind of constantly moving. So, what can we say about wellness capitalism? Wellness capitalism grew out of unmet needs, real needs. Ariza Inspire Co., any other therapists out there marketing themselves or their stuff, it came from seeing the hurt of the world, from seeing the hurt in our clients and knowing that they're not the only ones. Wellness capitalism gave people language, tools, and hope when the clinical world felt cold, distant, or dehumanizing. But it's still a market, and we can't deny that. And healing, when commodified, can become just another subscription service that profits from your pain. So what's the move? What do? We take what helps. We question what's sold to us. And we remember that true healing is not something you can buy. It's something you have to live into. And above all, healing should never require perfection, productivity, or even a payment plan, because you're already worthy of care, with or without the branding. So what do we do with this? Here's the thing. It's not about throwing the whole system away. It's about naming the forces that shape it. We acknowledge that diagnosis can help as well as harm. We can recognize that medication can heal and be overprescribed. We can admit that therapy can transform and be used to contain people. And we can see that the system profits from maintenance, not resolution. And most importantly, we ask better questions of what's going on. Is this helping me grow or keeping me dependent? Am I being treated like a person or just a billing code? Do I have access to the care that sees my context, not just my symptoms? The mental health industry is full of passionate, skilled, ethical providers, people doing their best inside a messy, broken system. But when profit gets involved, when care becomes chronic by design, and when complexity is flattened into something that's just labeled a disorder, we lose something. Healing becomes something you buy instead of something you move through. So let's not settle for symptom management alone. Let's push for trauma-informed systems, accessible community-based care, approaches that center on recovery and not just routine, and a culture that doesn't confuse being busy with being better. You deserve healing that doesn't come with a whole subscription model. But that's it for today's episode. Thanks for hanging out with me. If you found something helpful, inspiring, or even just validating, I'd love if you would follow the show, leave a review, or share this episode with someone who might need it. Do you want more tools to support your mental wellness journey? You can head over to arizainspire.com. You'll find free resources, self-paced courses, and workbooks to help you heal, grow, and show up for yourself. And don't forget to follow along on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Ariza Inspire. That's where we keep that conversation going, share mental health tips, and post about new episodes. So like I always say, my friends, take care of yourself, and I'll catch you next time. Be safe. Can't wait for next week? Here's a sneak peek of the next episode on the Ariza Inspire podcast. Access to therapy is a privilege, not a right. And at first glance, that might sound very cynical, but let's be honest, it sounds true. Because if we look around, even in 2025, therapy isn't as accessible as it could be.